this series, we present some of the most important philosophy books according to a survey done in 2003 by Filosofie Magazine. We present the work, about the context and the author, pull out the highlights of the book, and try and determine why it's still important and why read it today. So today we're going to look at Aristotle, who was Plato's most famous student for some 20 years before founding his own Lyceum. So he was both a student and ultimately a critic of Plato. Now, Aristotle pretty much single-handedly founded all major philosophical traditions, distinguishing what in Plato was still one wholeness. In his organon and his categories, he founds logic. Ethics and politics and aesthetics are determined with works that are still in authority today in each of their fields. For instance, the Nicomachean Ethics, which we'll deal with in another video. In his books on physics, he founds a philosophy of biology and of the soul, a certain very far predecessor of psychology. And in his Metaphysics, he establishes metaphysics. Now, the Metaphysics was mostly forgotten from Aristotle's death until its rediscovery somewhere in the 12th century. The book is basically a revolutionary attempt to define a whole new field of philosophical research, uniting all thought from previous philosophers, the pre-Socratics and Plato included, into one single study dedicated to the question of being. But the challenge with the Metaphysics as a book is also that it's not really a book. It's actually a collection of texts united and ordered much later by Andronicus of Rhodes, some 300 years after Aristotle's work. As a result, it's nearly impossible to discern to what extent the Metaphysics is actually written in chronological order, or much rather in a logical order, and the two don't always match up. Accordingly, the title Metaphysics can refer both to a collection of texts placed after the text on the physics, the metaphysics being after the physics, or it can much properly refer to the studies into the principles beyond physics, metaphysics as what lies beyond the physical. The same confusion basically persists throughout the reading of this very difficult book. It's not even clear what it's actually about. To be very short, Metaphysics proposes to identify what is first philosophy. But that first philosophy could both refer to the wisdom of the primary causes, it can refer to the study of being qua being, or it could even be something like a theology. First reading proposes philosophy as the study of the most fundamental or primary principles. That would be the study of the highest generality of knowledge. So starting from things that are immediately and easily known to us, we try and rise up to the things known in themselves. This is best introduced by the very first phrase of the book, where Aristotle states that all men by nature desire to know. It's further fleshed out in the book Beta, where Aristotle works out a number of common dilemmas in philosophy, such as, are there only things, or is there more between heaven and earth? Or what are the principles of things? Are they in individuals or in kinds? Or what is it to know a man? Should we know one individual, or should we know mankind as a whole? And Aristotle's starting point is that to establish that knowledge, we have our senses, we have experience, we also have technology, we also have action, and of course we have the use of our reason. And so reason is the faculty that we dispose of to know principles or the causes of things. Why are things what they are? To Aristotle, knowing why a thing is what it is actually knowing its cause in a number of different ways. First of all, we can inquire into the form of a thing, what kind of thing it is. If we take, for example, the Venus of Milo, we can say that it is a woman-shaped, that it has the form of a woman. This is where Aristotle is closest to Plato's theory of forms. But a second cause or principle of a thing is the matter. What is it actually made from? For example, the Venus of Milo is a large block of marble. Then the third question is, how did that thing become what it is now? For example, how did the Venus of Milo come to be? Well, it was made by Alexander of Antioch, who put a lot of work into it and who constructed this statue according to the standards of beauty of his time. And the fourth way in which we can understand what a thing is to ask for its goal. Why is that thing what it is? For example, the Venus of Milo might have been an object of veneration. So what Aristotle is doing, he is uniting all these partial elements of knowledge of his predecessors, notably Plato's thought of forms, but also the pre-Socratics of Miletus, who had proposed a philosophy focused on the matter or the substance of things. But Aristotle doesn't stop there. In the first phrase of the book Gamma, he states that he is looking for a certain form of knowledge that considers being qua being. So, whereas all other sciences consider only parts of being, philosophy is actually first philosophy or first knowledge because it considers being qua being, what it is to be. Now in the categories already, Aristotle had distinguished between the substance of thing, or its ousia, and the attributes. That is to say, there is a thing in itself, underneath or behind all those different attributes that we ascribe to it. This concept of ousia would later be translated precisely as substance, that which remains underneath all the changes and particularities. Now, when Plato tried to reply to the question, what is being, he took the rational route. He looked for the true being, that is to say, the eternal forms that would exist in the world of ideas, and of which particular instances are only a reflection or a reproduction. The Venus of Milo, for instance, is only a reproduction, or actually a reproduction of the form woman. But Aristotle disagrees here. According to Aristotle, being cannot be reduced only to forms. That would actually be doing the thing that we're talking about short. The other fundamental question that Aristotle has to deal with is that of becoming. How do things actually change? Aristotle proposes to consider that all things reside between their origin or their efficient cause and their final cause or their goal. And between these two poles, things move from a potentiality to a state of actuality. For example, the block of marble in potentiality could become the statue. In that case, what changes are the attributes of that block of marble. Another example is when we eat our food or drink our coffee, that food actually becomes part of our body. In that case, not only does the form change, but actually the substance itself, the matter of the thing, seems to change. And the other way around, when we go from the question of becoming back to that of being, we see that simpler substances have a higher potential to become many things. For example, water could in potentiality become apple, or it could become a human being, or a cat, or many, many more things. An apple, in turn, could become a tree, or it could become human food, etc. These examples immediately show that there can be different sources of change. This change can come from the outside, for example, when I eat the apple, or when a sculptor makes a statue out of a block of marble, or the changes can come from the inside, from the thing itself, for example, when the apple is left to itself and a tree could grow out of it. And in this way, we're getting to yet another way of understanding the metaphysics, which is as a study of theology. Aristotle's metaphysics can lead up to his theology, to knowledge of God in a number of ways, one of which is through this thought of the efficient cause. According to this idea, all changes must have a cause. All movement from potentiality to actuality must come from somewhere. Now, all these causes must have then an origin, and all these different movements from potentiality to actuality actually point back to an original unmoved mover. So instead of accepting a sort of infinite regress of cause and effect, Aristotle proposes that there must have been a prime unmoved mover. Why still read Aristotle's Metaphysics today? Well, where to start? It's basically one of the most important and profound books ever written. It single-handedly founded the way we consider philosophy still today, as a study dedicated to the being qua being, to the essences of things, as a discipline searching for the eternal truths behind reality. Every page and every chapter brings new insights and articulates new fundamental problems for philosophy that we're still dealing with today. So the impact of Aristotle's Metaphysics on philosophy today can hardly be overstated. But it's also a very complex book, a very difficult book to read, very hard to understand, and harder still to interpret and to fully capture what Aristotle is trying to do and trying to work out. It's a must-read for anyone dedicated to philosophy. That really demands full attention and dedication to get through it. So on one hand, it's surprising that Aristotle's Metaphysics is not actually the most important philosophy book ever written. But on the other hand, it's also understandable that it's the sort of book that only a true die-hard philosopher would try and pick up.